Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a deeply relatable, and honestly, a remarkably frustrating psychological phenomenon. We're going to unpack exactly what happens when our logical brain completely processes a stressful event perfectly, but our physical and emotional body, well, it seemingly falls apart anyway. Have you ever felt that? That profound disconnect where your conscious, mature self is just completely at odds with your subconscious reaction? It is a fascinating tension, and understanding it can fundamentally change how we process life's inevitable bumps in the road.
Really think about this for a second. Have you ever logically brushed off a minor stressful event? Maybe a weird interaction with a coworker or a disappointing text from a friend, only to realize hours later that your mood has completely derailed anyway? That jarring gap between knowing something isn't a big deal and actually feeling like it isn't a big deal, well, that's our starting point today. It captures that exact moment when you realize you aren't quite as in control of your internal state as you thought you were.
Section 1. A Summer of Awareness, Setting the Baseline. To really understand this psychological disconnect, we're following a real-life micro-moment that was documented in a personal audio diary. It all begins on a really hopeful morning, literally the very first day of summer. Our speaker starts out with this incredibly strong desire for renewal and sets some, honestly, beautiful grounding intentions. She wants to live consciously, really savoring the warm weather, which she notes is super important for both her physical and psychological well-being. She adds evening walks to build consistency, and she plans to dive into psychology literature to solidify her education. This is a highly self-aware, proactive person doing absolutely everything right to establish a sturdy baseline of positive mental health. She is setting herself up for a fantastic season.
Section 2. Losing the factory settings, the internal shift.
But then, an unexpected psychological breakdown happens. Let's look at how that sturdy baseline is totally disrupted. Despite all those wonderful summer intentions, an event happens, a disappointment involving another person. Suddenly, the speaker realizes something is fundamentally off. She notes in her diary, "I lost my lightness and life optimism. I lost myself a little bit." Man, those vulnerable words perfectly capture a very specific, deeply uncomfortable symptom. It wasn't just a bad mood, right? It was a heavy, noticeable absence of her usual spark. She was experiencing this sudden void right where her optimism usually lived.
And what's really fascinating here is the terminology she uses to describe this loss. She actually calls it her factory settings. It's such a brilliant metaphor. She defines this as her natural essence, her charisma, her femininity, and her foundational core identity. She didn't lose her self-worth. She explicitly notes that she still loved herself as the universe loves her, but she felt completely disconnected from this natural essence. Basically, her factory settings had been totally scrambled, leaving her feeling like a slightly out-of-tune version of herself.
Section 3. The Illusion of Control, Logic versus Emotion. So we have to zoom out and ask, why did this internal shift happen when the triggering event, as she notes herself, wasn't actually a catastrophe at all? Well, this illustrates a core tension. On side A, we have the logical mind. When the event happened, the speaker's brain acted as a calm observer. She viewed the situation maturely and recognized, clear as day, that it was just a non-life-altering disappointment. But on side B, her physical and moral essence involuntarily lost its lightness and optimism anyway. She felt fundamentally disconnected. Her wise, logical conclusions literally did nothing to stop the physiological reality of her emotional loss.
Simply put, the logical brain said, "Hey, I'm fine, this isn't a big deal." But the body said otherwise. The speaker expresses immense surprise in her diary about this. She was shocked that observing the situation from the outside, analyzing it, and making all the correct mental deductions didn't act as a shield. It didn't stop the internal derailment. It's kind of like telling your hand not to hurt after touching a hot stove just because you logically understand the thermodynamics of heat transfer. The body still registers the burn, right?
Section 4. The Autonomy of Impact, the Core Psychological Truth.
And this brings us to the vital lesson embedded in this whole experience. The primary impact of an event is completely autonomous and uncontrollable. The initial hit, like the exact degree to which an event impacts us physically and morally in that very first instance, is entirely independent of our conscious control. It does not matter how much you've worked on yourself, how processed your trauma is, or how wise and rational you think you are.
As she concludes in her recording, the degree of impact of this or that event does not depend on the person. It has its degree of impact initially. You just can't simply tell yourself you have brushed something off and expect your nervous system to instantly obey. The primary impact happens independently of your settings, and honestly, this is a profound relief if you think about it.
It means that when you feel that sudden loss of lightness or that drop in optimism, it is not a failure of your intellect or your maturity. It's just the autonomous nature of human psychology doing exactly what it does. The impact simply lands where it lands.
Section 5. Mastering the secondary response, where our power lies.
So if we can't control the initial hit, we have to look really closely at where our agency actually lives. Processing life's triggers happens in two distinct steps. Step 1 is that initial impact, the autonomous, completely uncontrollable physical and moral reaction, the feeling of losing your factory settings. But Step 2 is the secondary response, the application of conscious awareness. This shows that while the first step is completely out of our hands, the second step is where your power entirely returns. You don't control the wave, but you absolutely control how you surf it.
So what does that secondary response actually look like? Well, once the initial impact has occurred and the dust has somewhat settled, we can then apply specific tools to alleviate our condition. We can apply therapeutic tools, things we've learned through psychology, journaling, or going to therapy. We can deliberately shift and manage our concentration, redirecting our focus right back to those summer intentions, like our daily walks and routines. We can choose to react with conscious awareness moving forward, gradually and gently guiding our nervous system back to our factory settings.
To wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If you truly accept that the initial impact of life's events is completely out of your control, that it's an autonomous, biological, and psychological reaction, how will you choose to navigate your secondary response today? Embrace the fact that you can't control every emotional reaction or prevent every loss of your lightness. Stop fighting the initial impact. Instead, recognize it, give yourself some grace, and then step fully into your power by choosing exactly what you do next. Thanks for diving into this with me, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.